Hey guys, welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast presented by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. My name is Steven. I'm your host. Happy to be here as always. And joining me today are Tyler and Alex. Tyler, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing very well. I'm doing much better than that guy from Pro Football Focus this morning.
I feel like people were just mad about nothing there. I mean, like
They really were.
all he said was that Tyreek Hill might be. Like he didn't flat out say it wasn't even a take. It was a half take, and people were mad about it. PFF sucks, but that wasn't something to be mad about. Alex, how you doing today, man?
Doing pretty good. I actually wrote today for the first time in 40 years in draft time. So it was nice, but
yeah, the first couple of weeks of the off season are always just like, all right, what do I write about? What do we want to talk about? So we actually do have our last interview from these reporters with our Georgia reporter, Jake Rowe, who was kind enough to join me, provide some insight into Mark Webb as well as Trey McKitty. So we're going to get started with that right now. All right. So thank you again to Jake and all the other reporters who joined us today. We're going to talk about some of the recent news, and we're going to do it in a format of something, nothing, or everything. And then after that, we're going to revisit the kicking conversation around Josh Lambo, Younghoe Koo, and whoever the Chargers pick this year. So it's going to be fun talking kickers today, revisiting some terrible memories, but it's all good. First and foremost, we're going to start with some news. The Chargers have signed or claimed off of waivers Austin Proehl from the 49ers, formerly of the XFL. So, Alex, we'll start with you. Is the signing of Austin Proehl everything, something, or nothing?
Nothing. I mean, it's a training camp body. Like that's kind of how I interpreted it. I maybe we'll talk about Eli Stove later, or maybe we talk about him now. But it just kind of felt like, since that didn't work out and it seems like he's not on the roster, then this was sort of just getting another camp body, which I don't mind. I mean, I think he's a decent, kind of slot receiver and, obviously played in the XFL, but it just kind of seemed like, okay, well, Dylan Cantrell is back on the team. That's what this signing felt like. Just, okay, here's the 5'10", receiver. And I don't know, like it doesn't seem like he might have much special teams value from what I've seen about him. So I don't know. It just seems kind of like camp fodder.
All right, Tyler, your thoughts here.
Nothing.
There's my. If anyone who's just listening, there's the SpongeBob conch shell reference. Man, I was so happy to bring that up for this today. Yeah, I kind of agree. I don't think he's quite like Dylan Cantrell. I think Cantrell had a much better RAS score, which this guy has a abysmal 3.63, but he did score elite in the agility grade. So he's a guy that they could potentially see as someone who could do damage in the after the catch in open space. You'd hope I didn't watch any freaking all 22 or whatever of this guy, but of the YouTube highlights that I found, he has some really great elusiveness and balance to take. I think it was like a flat or an in or something, and stay in bounds and force him to go 50 yards to the house. He had 0 drops in his final college season on 31 targets. So I think the theme of them having, a hands guy like Palmer and Proehl added to the team makes sense. But based on the roster, as a short and intermediate possession kind of guy, this is your KJ Hill competition. And I just don't like, I'd rather just take Hill because I think he can provide some special teams reps. So, good luck. He could totally make the roster. I'm not saying Hill's like a shoe-in to make the spot, but I don't think this is much right now.
Yeah, I have to agree here. I think a lot of people were trying to make this big takeaway that like, oh, this is bad for KJ Hill. I guess, but to me, the Josh Palmer drafting is the thing that's bad for KJ Hill. Like, I don't think Austin Proehl is, like Alex said, more than anything than a training camp body. Whether this is to replace Eli Stove, who apparently is off the Chargers roster, I could see that. Maybe he is just a training camp body, which I'm a little surprised that, Stove isn't on the roster anymore, which I do think is something, at least for him. But Austin Proehl signing, I don't think it's very much. I think it's, I can't even remember the last time that they had someone like this make the actual roster. Because to me, I think you have a clear 5 receivers who are going to make it in Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Josh Palmer, Jalen Guyton, and Tyron Johnson. And then if they carry 6, you've got Joe Reed, KJ Hill, Jason Moore. I think those are the 3 that are fighting for it. They've got a couple other, practice squad guys. I think his name is John Hurst on the roster. But Austin Proehl, I don't think this is really anything.
Yeah, and it's just like if Eli Stove was on the roster, it was like, okay, he's kind of Joe Reed, and it's like you can kind of give him that competition. But like to me, I guess if you really wanted to reach, it's like he's KJ Hill competition, but I just don't believe that because he's not as good as KJ Hill, as a slot receiver. So it just seems very much like a kind of training camp fodder signing, and I'm not against it. Maybe he proves us wrong in the preseason, but I don't think anything of it right now.
Yeah, training camp fodder sightings could work. Just one quote I pulled from an article I already forget, so I can't reference it. Sorry. The quote says, Proehl wasn't invited to the NFL Combine in Indy, but he did attend a regional scouting combine in Tampa and repeatedly stole the show at the event, showing off fingertip catches and explosive cuts in his route running. I'm not saying that means he makes the team, but if he goes out and shows out like he did at this thing that allowed him to be picked in the draft in the 7th round, maybe he finds a spot in the roster.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that he's bringing in, that Staley and company are bringing in more competition. So we'll have to see. All right, next piece of news that we want to talk about, according to Neil Stratton, the Chargers are moving forward without respected national scout Tom McConaughey, who spent 24 years with the team, of obviously part of the staff that drafted Justin Herbert, Derwin James, all these players, Sean Merriman, Phillip Rivers. So Tyler, is the Chargers moving on from Tom McConaughey everything, something, or nothing?
It's nothing. I mean, I don't know if it's nothing or not, but how do we like determine whether it's something or like it is something? Sure, they're moving on from a scout, but like, I don't know. I didn't know this guy's name. I didn't know he existed until they announced that they were moving on from him. So, for him, thank you for Austin Eckler. Apparently, the Chargers have always had a specific player type at RB2, was like Sproles, Woodhead, Oliver Eckler, Pope. So I'm curious how much of a role he had in that, if at all. But he was a regional scout first and then a national scout in 2008. And in between the time he was a national scout and then when Telesco got there, so 2008 to 2012, his first round picks were not his, but the team's first round picks were Antoine Cason, Larry English, Ryan Matthews, Corey Leggett, and then Melvin Ingram. The drafts weren't like that great overall. The best picks being like Melvin Ingram, Daryl Stuckey in the 4th, and Louis Vasquez in the 3rd. So like, I guess I'm kind of, I don't know, like it wasn't great, but again, how much do I know about this guy? I don't know how much of a role he had. So I guess I'm surprised they're moving on from him because he's been with the team for so long and they just came off what we think is a really good draft. So maybe they're just blaming him for the Roundtree pick.
I think it could theoretically like be something down the road. But like ultimately it's Tom Telesco who has the final saying power in the pick. I don't think there's quite like an equivalent situation to what you saw in San Francisco this year where you have this disagreement between Kyle Shanahan and the scouting department as to what to do with the 3rd pick, right? Like that was kind of a very public storyline, but it seemed like Tom Telesco, has made these picks himself and he has certain kind of picks he likes to make. And it doesn't seem like there's too much divide between him and the scouting staff. So to me, I don't think changing a body there or changing the thought process is really going to happen, and ultimately, as long as he's the GM, he's the guy who gets final say.
Yeah, I think this is something, but none of us know how much of a something that it is really, because like the both of you have said, we don't know who is involved and how much they are involved. But losing a scout of 24 years, like that's kind of a big deal, that means somebody else is going to have to step up, and we of course are not going to see the fruits of that labor, so to speak, but I do think this could be something. All right, the last one here that we wanted to talk about, we didn't really talk about this very much, and that's the Chargers signing Christian Covington. Alex, is that everything, something, or nothing?
I'll say something. I think, he's not going to be expected to be like a great defensive lineman or something, but the Chargers have needed depth behind, Jones, Tillery, and Joseph for quite a while. So if you got a guy who's rotational and maybe he plays 5-10 snaps a game, like I think that there's value to that. So He was pretty decent in Cincinnati, can get after the quarterback a little bit. I have no problem with that, and I think it's actually a good thing. Now, I would also like them to address, the depth at a couple other positions, but to me, this feels like very much a, hey, sorry, we didn't draft a DT signing. So I have no problem with it. And, it makes sense with the kind of player they got as a rotational piece.
Yeah, I do think this is actually something. He had a great RES score, at least when he came out of college.
Yeah.
But not in terms of height or weight, at least at the time he was drafted. And that kind of falls in line with the theme of, I think, Justin Jones losing weight, if I'm not mistaken. So, when it comes to freeing up Aaron Donald, there was some sort of twist, perhaps. The Rams, obviously, this is the Chargers, but the Rams needed defenders to wreak havoc. One guy penetrating, the other guy looping around. And so, for having more explosive guys than maybe bigger guys, with strength, which, Joseph and Fehoko supposedly are, it makes sense. I didn't watch Foster Merrill, but Goldwire, the undrafted free agent from Louisville, he's more explosive than he is strong at the point of attack. So I do think there's a theme here. I threw on just one game, week 17 against the Ravens, and he opened that game as more of a one tech, but in the second half, he switched to three tech. So I do see some of that versatility, I suppose. I've been watching and trying to take notes on some of the Rams plays from last year, finally, at least against the pass. And it's nearly impossible to figure out where each defensive lineman is going to line up prior to watching the actual play, because they're just all over. Like whatever Staley needs, that's where they are. So someone who has that kind of versatility, I think, based on the one game that I watched, that'd be, pretty beneficial to the defense. So, I don't know how much the current sixth interior defensive lineman on the team is going to play, but I do feel better about the veteran presence that he brings over an undrafted free agent, which, I think we had neither of the defensive tackles making the roster based on our predictions.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is something, we all kind of talked about, the desire to bring back a person like Damian Square to just be a serviceable body behind these players, because Tillery has, in terms of playing on the field in the NFL, he's been pretty durable, but he does have some injury history from his Notre Dame days. Justin Jones hasn't played a full season, I think, since his rookie year. And Live Out Joseph is an older player. So I know he played all 16 games last year, but the odds are that he's going to miss a couple games this year, if not more, because of his age and just because that's how football works. So them getting a player like this, I think, is something. I feel much more comfortable playing him than I do either of the undrafted free agents, Braden Fehoko. So to me, it could be some competition for Cortez Broughton, who we haven't really seen a whole lot of either. So again, kind of that theme. And his body type definitely fits what Brandon Staley has wanted from the defensive end, or the defensive tackle / defensive end spot. You look at Roy Robertson Harris, you look at Shelby Harris, you look at Jerry Tillery, you look at Michael Brockers, like they're, like Tyler was saying, more explosive, longer tackles. And so he fits that profile. And I think that is something going forward.
How many defensive tackles did they carry on the roster last season? Do you remember?
The Chargers or the Rams?
Chargers. Joseph, Jones, Tillery, Broughton, occasionally Broughton, but sometimes inactive. Fehoko, 5.
And Square.
Oh, Square? They carried 6? Oh, I guess there maybe is a spot for him.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know how many the Rams carried. I'll have to look into that one. All right, so we're going to move on now to talk about some kickers. This is your special teams episode. Someone commented a while back that we don't talk about special teams enough, so here you go. There was this graphic that popped up the other day that since the Chargers cut Josh Lambo and Younghoe Koo in 2017, Josh Lambo has led the NFL in field goal percentage with 95. Younghoe Koo has really been, a smash find for the Falcons. He's hit 88.7% of his field goals since being cut from the Chargers. And the Chargers actually have the lowest percentage in the NFL since that time at 74.6. So all three of us have, we all remember the circumstances surrounding Josh Lambo and Younghoe Koo and why they were cut. But Tyler, what was your takeaway, your thought process when this graphic was brought up the other day?
To do a little bit of research and remember kind of what happened. I remember more of the Koo stuff than the Lambo stuff. Although, I at some of these terrible games, like Koo missing that field goal. And going back to an article, I guess it seems like every year the Chargers fans are forgetting what happened to Lambo in that final season. Every time I see that graphic about Lambo, it's like, well, they had legitimate reasons. He only was hitting 81%. He didn't kick a single ball over 50 yards. In an article I wrote, and I can't fact check this unless I go back and watch all the games. At the time that I wrote the article, he had kicked 3 balls out of bounds to allow the opponents to start, way further up in those games. I didn't remember that at all. Of course, he was seen laughing with the Raiders after one loss. He blew that kick in 2016 to not be able to force overtime to beat the Browns and give their only win. So, having Koo and Lambo next to each other, I'm not like a huge fan of that because I think the situations were very different. Whereas Koo, and I think everyone also forgets this, that Shelby Harris blocked that ball. They kicked that when he kicked that ball in Denver, and they called the timeout. But when he kicked that ball went in. He made that kick. Unfortunately, they called the timeout, so it didn't count. The next one was blocked by Shelby Harris, and everyone thinks, oh my gosh, Younghoe Koo, missed this kick. Oh my gosh. And then he goes against Miami and misses another 2 kicks. And of course, the game either tie or a game winner. But I think everyone unfairly remembers that. But after that, after the miss, but again, it was rough in Miami. He was 2 for 2 on field goals, 4 for 4 on extra points. And, they cut him missing 2 kicks. Granted, they were, if I don't count the block, which that's not a miss, it's a block. So if you really cut him for missing 2 kicks, and, he was the difference in that Miami game, but maybe you shouldn't be getting shut down by Miami in your home opener and should be able to score a little bit more. And as far as guys, they're just like looking at rookie seasons, you got to give these guys some time. Like Lambo did have a couple of years. Gostkowski, hit 76% of his kicks. Lutz, 82%. Kading, 80%. Robbie Gold, 77% of his kicks. So to cut a rookie that fast when he's just starting to actually hit his kicks again, granted, not really far kicks, no 50-yarders, but to cut him at that point was a huge mistake. I wrote that it was a mistake to do that, even though I kind of understood it, but to give up on him that quickly was rough. And of course, the Chargers were in kicking purgatory until they got to Badgley. So, just looking at that graphic, long way of saying, I went down memory lane, had to look up some stuff to see the context. And the Lambo decision I totally get. The Koo decision I really didn't get. But either way, the Chargers have been screwed by both.
Kicking purgatory until we got to Badgley is a funny phrase because we're still in purgatory. But I don't know. I mean, I guess looking back on it, I definitely agree with Lambo, just because I think that situation got bad. And I mean, he almost had really the full season there. And Koo is the one that I think you can look back and be like, maybe, if he's given another couple games, he could have gotten something. But I also think that one of the things that contributed to that situation was Anthony Lynn being a first-year head coach. And it was like, Chargers start they were 0-3, I think, after that. 0-4.
Well, after the Miami game, yeah.
Yeah, after the Miami game.
Too.
And I went to the Giants game where they finally won. But so the 0-4 team, it's like, he kind of has to make the move there, Stephen brought up that stat last time about how many first-year head coaches, and there's usually one that's like one and done. So, if you approach 0-5, 0-6, like you're kind of digging yourself that hole deeper. And then Anthony Lynn has that kind of run. That's the 9-3 run at the end of 2017. But I don't know, for me, I just think kicking is such a fickle thing in general that we can look back and be like, oh, this guy shouldn't have been cut. But maybe Younghoe Koo kind of needed that change of scenery, right? Because then he goes on and signs with the AAF Atlanta team, kind of rebuilds his image there. Then the Patriots practice squad. Then there was this journey back to being a kicker, right? It wasn't just being cut by the Chargers and then then he became a star in Atlanta, right? It was just kind of a journey for him to kind of regain his confidence and regain everything that had sort of maybe been broken in his development a little bit. So, I think we can look back on it and kind of have regrets. And maybe that's fans' fears about cutting Badgley. I guess I would say the difference with those two and Badgley is that I knew that they had the leg. Lambo, just kind of whiffed some of those 50-yarders. But actually in the season prior was pretty decent from deep. And then Koo, I mean, we saw the video of him doing the backflip into the kick. Like leg strength was never the question with him. I feel, and to credit Badgley, he does have the 59-yarder, but like I've never felt like he's been a very powerful kicker, I guess. Like he's just kind of been like accurate from inside, which is definitely a skill that's, worth having. But he just hasn't been the same from 40 plus in a couple years now, really since he got injured in 2019. So I think that's kind of the difference with the Badgley purgatory situation compared to those two.
Yeah, I think when you're looking back on this situation between Josh Lambo and Younghoe Koo, it tends to be like revisionist history, right? Like, oh, we never should have cut so-and-so. And it's like, well, the decision to cut Josh Lambo came in favor of Younghoe Koo, right? Like Younghoe Koo was brought in to be competition for Josh Lambo. That's a great decision. I think, you look around the league and even the teams who have great kickers, they bring in competition every single offseason. I mean, the Ravens have arguably the best kicker of all time. And every other year they bring in an undrafted free agent kicker. I think one year they even drafted one, and they even traded a kicker to the Vikings who needed another kicker. Like, so if it's good enough for the Ravens to bring in competition, then every team should be doing it. And so I think when you look back at that situation, it's important to remember that Koo was brought in for competition against Josh Lambo, and he won the job. Now, the cutting of Younghoe Koo definitely was premature, but I'm glad that Alex pointed it out that it took him a little bit to get going. It took him a little bit to get back into the swing of things. It wasn't, that immediate transformation to another team. And even for Lambo, it wasn't. Lambo didn't kick for, like a month or so after he got cut, and then he was okay in Jacksonville in that first season. So kickers are, like Alex said, it's a fickle thing. You look at somebody like Matt Gay, who I think is one of the better college kickers that I've ever seen. He gets drafted by the Buccaneers. He's okay as a rookie. They bring in competition and he loses the job. And then he goes to the Rams and he has a really good season for the Rams. And so kicking is just something that unfortunately is so hard for these teams to nail down. And, if you have a Justin Tucker, a Will Lutz, or Adam Vinatieri in his prime, like, good for you. You don't have to cut a kicker every other year. If you don't, you have to cut a kicker every other year. And that's just where the Chargers are at this year.
Yeah, we need to really find a way for Steven not to wave Matt Gay into every episode. I don't know how this keeps happening, but it's been like the last 5 podcasts at least.
I'm sorry.
But I think you definitely have a point with, unless you have like a Tucker or a Butker, right? Like those kind of guys that, you probably won't have to cut. It's just, it is kind of like a fickle thing. Like if you miss 2 or 3 field goals in a row, or, you have 2-3 bad games strung together, like you're probably going to get cut. And we've seen kickers like, Dan Bailey is a great example of like a guy who was looked at as like a top 10 kicker in the league for, all those years. And then, goes to Minnesota and has his struggles, right? And then, is on the cut line, right? So even for, some of those all-time great kickers, right? Like eventually there is that downfall, or, even if you just string a couple bad games together, it's like a team's going to move on from you, regardless of whether you're Joe Schmo or one of the best kickers of all time.
Okay, so here's the thing. They have a bunch of Joe Schmoes when they brought in, like, okay, so Tristan Viz, whatever the hell, he had 60% of his field goals in college. Like, come on, he's got 1 game under his belt, 3 made field goals. I mean, he was perfect in that 1 game. He was great. But I mean, 60% of field goals in college ain't that great. And then Alex Kessman, 71.9% in college. Like what? Like, yeah, it's a competition, I suppose. But is there really competition here? Like, are any of these guys really going to push Badgley, or is this more about? Are they going to push him off the roster? Like, I know you said Kessman last time, but like, is this more to replace Badgley, or do you think it's more to push Badgley to become better? And can Badgley even respond to that?
I think they're just gonna go with whoever the best kicker is out of that group. If it's Vizcaino, it's Vizcaino. If it's Badgley, it's Badgley. Like, to me, you have nothing to lose by bringing in other guys, whether it's, the best kicker in the country or, just a guy from last year that you noticed. So for me, like, as long as you bring in some kind of competition for him, like the big problem, I guess for Badgley is not just like he's missing field goals, right? Like the issue last year was specifically from 40 plus. And like, to me, if you have a kicker like Kessman, who does have a big leg, right? And Vizcaino, I don't think he has like a big leg particularly, but, is a relatively strong kicker in that department. I think as long as you have some guys that can compete with him on that level and, push him to make his 40-yard field goals, then that's a good thing. But to me, I get the rap on Kessman being a subpar kicker, but also, college kicking is kind of different, and he did boost that up to 79% in 2020. So to me, I just think he has one of the better chances because, he did boost his field goal percentage last year and was also Badgley was 14 for 14 inside 40. Kessman was 14 for 15 last season. So to me, I think he has a really good shot to knock him off. And, if you're talking about like those 40 plus yard attempts, like that's really where the difference is between those two guys. So I think, again, Vizcaino, at least has some kicking experience in his one NFL game last year. And, obviously was a 3-4 year college kicker. So I think that's what they're bringing him in for. To me, you just bring, whoever the best looking guy out of those guys is. And, the reality with kicking is at some point you can just be kind of lied to, right? Like somehow the Chargers walked out of the 2018 kicking competition and they were like, Caleb Sturgis is our guy. And then it turned out Caleb Sturgis was not our guy. So like, sometimes it lies to you, and sometimes some guy misses a field goal, sometimes some guy makes a field goal, and that's the difference in them making the roster, based on one preseason game, right? Like, so the whole evaluation process on some of this stuff, it just isn't as substantial as when you're talking about like evaluating, who's the wide receiver to make this team, or who's the last running back to make the roster. It's just harder with kickers because you're judging a smaller sample size, smaller amount of kicks, and like ultimately kind of a really dumb thing in the sport. Like there's no other NBA, if you watch the NBA, like, we have a hired free throw shooter who takes the free throw. No, everyone takes free throws, right? Yeah. Like, so it's just kind of, football is just different in that way. And I think it's just, that makes it a harder position to really evaluate.
I don't know, man. I the last time we talked about kickers, or whenever that was, I was like, yeah, Kessman makes sense. And it does make sense to some degree, but I don't know. I'm just going backwards on the whole Badgley thing. Like, I want him to stick around. Like, do I know, like, yeah, in training camp, whatever, that Vizcaino or Kessman are the better kickers? Like, maybe, but I don't know. On one hand, Badgley has not been good for a year and a half or 2 years, whatever it is. On the other hand, he did do some stuff that nobody else in Chargers history has, including it's been a while. Granted, it has been a while, but the way, like, how good he was in that first season, being clutch in the playoffs, being perfect in the playoffs against Baltimore, probably the reason they won that game. Not really, but like one of the main reasons they won that game. I have a hard time letting him go when I think that someone like Darius Swinton, who has a knack for, giving punters and kickers their best seasons, whether it be Prater or Colquitt or Robbie Gould, I feel like he can get back to form unless the injury has completely shut him out. Like, if there's an injury that's lingering and he just can no longer kick anymore, and that's the issue, then yeah, I totally understand. But I don't know. I have a hard time letting him go, and I don't want a third guy on that graphic. But, although it would make sense. Like, again, it would, like Lambo, would make sense why you would let him go, even if he goes somewhere and does well. But yeah, I don't know. I'm having a really hard time with this one. This is a tough one for me.
So let's say the Chargers do decide to stick with Badgley.
Okay.
Let's say, the second week against the Cowboys, Badgley has to hit a 51-yarder to win the game. They're down by 1, need a 51-yard field goal to win the game. How confident are you? Because you're the one who, I don't want to say you're advocating for him to be back, but
sure,
of the three of us, it seems like you want him back more than the other two of us. So,
yeah.
Badgley hitting a 51-yard. He trots out there for a 51-yarder to win the game. How confident are you?
100% confident he's totally going to make it. No, don't know. Like, it's so tough to say. Like, where is he at after working with Swinton and after maybe being healthy and with the special teams group in front of him that won't get him killed? Not that Badgley had that issue, but Tai Long certainly did. Like, I think he can make that. Look, the Chargers made the playoffs with him making one 50-yard field goal in 2018. So it's not like they're always going to need that. Granted, it does come down to that. And that one game could be a big difference for the Chargers this season. But I think he can do it. And when all else fails, Herbert bomb to Tyron Johnson for the 85th time, somehow catching a ball on a desperate Hail Mary. God, I'm such a homer. You know what? He's going to prove everyone wrong. This is my anti-neighbors. Let's do it.
There we go. There we go. I mean, it certainly is possible that he's able to round back into form, right? Like, because it's not like this is somebody, we never saw Younghoe Koo be like a really effective kicker.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen Badgley be an effective kicker, right? It was 3 years ago. But, it is possible that the Chargers are able to, get the most out of him. Maybe they, attack the offensive game plan a little bit more aggressively because they know that Badgley is maybe struggling a little bit from 50 plus. Like, you can manage a kicker who doesn't have a strong leg. I think, going back to the University of Utah, before Matt Gay, there's this guy named Andy Phillips. I know I always talk about Utah because it's what I know, right? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I get you.
They had this kicker named Andy Phillips, and he did not have a strong leg. And so they managed him in a way that, he could be effective as a mid-range, short-range kicker. You can do that kind of thing with Badgley if you are more comfortable with him in the short range than Alex Kessman. So can Alex Kessman make it? Yeah, 100%, because he has the stronger leg. But if the difference is a guy who can make 6 out of 10 kicks from 50 or 4 out of 10 kicks from 50 versus being more accurate in the short term, then it makes sense that they would take the more accurate short-term kicker, because that's something that is, more of a skill versus, kicking from 50 yards plus. You've got a lot of things that need to go right. So it absolutely is possible that Badgley comes back and is able to rediscover his form. It's also possible that Kessman is able to beat him out. So I can see both sides. I personally would go with the player who has the stronger leg, because I think you can work with him to become more accurate in the short term, but you can't teach Michael Badgley to suddenly have a strong leg. Like, that's just not happening.
Yeah, you asked what the confidence interval is on week 2 Dallas. He asked to make a 51-yard field goal. I mean, it's what the confidence interval was last year for me. Like, every time Michael Badgley walked up, did any of us think he was making a 40-plus yard field goal? Like, whether it was the Raiders game, the Saints game, it never felt like it was happening. And so for me, that's the thing. Like, I will give credence to the idea that special teams coaching can change things, right? We've seen that before. Particularly, I think special teams blocking. If you get better blocking in front of him, right? One of his misses is technically the Patriots block that happened. So it's like, there is stuff like that where I think you can kind of fix that for sure with special teams. I just am kind of like, well, if coaching was such a big deal and, he was great in 2018 and bad in 2020, it's like his special teams coach was the same guy that we all hated for the whole time he was here, and George Stewart. So it's like, suddenly, we're going to bring in Darius Winton, who I like, but I don't think he's going to change the whole game with Michael Badgley and suddenly make him into, something he's not. Or, if he brings him back to that 2018 form, great. I just don't know if coaching, particularly for Badgley, has been the issue as opposed to his form and kind of lack of leg power. So, for me, it's not even that you have to knock in like 50-yard field goals all the time. Like, that doesn't happen. But to me, like, you do have to knock in 40-yard field goals, and he was 8 of 13 last year from 40 plus, just from 40 to 50. And that's kind of subpar for an NFL kicker. That's basically approaching like 60%. So for me, like, I just don't think the Chargers can be put in a position where they're at the 28-yard line before halftime and there's 6 seconds left, and they're contemplating throwing a bomb into the end zone or kicking the field goal. Like, you take the points when they're given to you, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that they don't feel like, or at least all of last year, didn't feel like Anthony Lynn trusted his kicker to do it. I just don't know how you can go into that this year with the same situation.
Yeah, I mean, different coaching staff could certainly change things a little bit, and like I said, you can manage it. But to me, like it just seemed like Badgley wasn't super confident last year. I think that was kind of the issue, because in 2018, when Badgley trots out there in Pittsburgh, I had full confidence that he was going to make that kick, and he made it 3 times, I think, or maybe it was just the twice after the timeouts. But you look at
No, I think he missed one of them. One, I think he missed the first one, then it got called back, and he made the last 2. Something. Artie Burns won the game, but
maybe I'm thinking of a different game then. But like in 2018, I had confidence in Badgley making kicks, and last year, I think there was kind of whether it was the missed kicked or the blocked or kicked or whatever the case may be, it just seemed like he wasn't playing at the level in terms of confidence that he was in 2018.
All right, Alex, or either of you guys want to make a bet on Badgley's field goal percentage, or even just making the team?
I think he can make the team. Like, I don't think that's that out of the range of possibilities. Like, but if we were to make a bet, I'll put the line at 82.5%. Are you taking no, I'll put the line at 80%. Are you going over or under?
Well, that's over, I think, if he makes it. I think that's pretty easy. I was gonna say I thought 82.5 was a little more fair.
Okay,
80%. What is considered a good season for kickers?
I mean, I would say like 85. Like, I feel like that's kind of the percentage. Like, Badgley was 71 last year. Like, that's
Piece of kick. Okay, 85. You want to go 85?
Yeah, okay.
Let me look at some stats from last year.
Okay.
If Badgley hits over 85, I will buy Tyler a $20 PF Chang's gift card. And if he if he doesn't, then Tyler has to buy me a $20 PF Chang's gift card.
Okay. Sounds good. I don't know if is that average for good kickers? Is that like, what's the threshold here, Steven?
I'm trying to look, but NFL Network. Okay, there we go. So last year, Graham Gano actually led the league in kicking percentage at 96.
Okay.
Boswell, Koo, Carlson, Santos, and Nick Folk and Butker were all above 90. Justin Tucker actually had 89, which is interesting. Rodrigo Blankenship, who people kind of liked, he was 86. Brandon McManus was 82. Robbie Gold 82. Greg Zerline 82.
So my line of 82.5 was kind of right. Like that
was impressive. I don't know where you pulled that from, but
my ass.
That was pretty good.
That's where I pulled it from.
Will Lutz was 82. Wow, Chase McLaughlin. Oh, he's only 5 kicks, but Chase McLaughlin was 80%.
That's the one I regret, Chase McLaughlin. What did he kick for like 1 game? And then Nick remember the Nick Rose game against the Jets?
Oh gosh, that was bad.
That was the game Keenan Allen had the interception.
Oh yeah. So Badgley was 72.7 last year.
What was 2019?
80 something. It was like 80. I think it was 80 flat. I'll Google it.
Okay. Do you want 82, Alex, or 85? I'll let you pick.
Let's do 82.5. That's the number. 82.
So he has to get over 82.5. Okay. 82.5. Yes. He goes over. You owe me. Get your $20 ready.
Okay.
So Badgley was 93 in 2018 and 81.25 in 19 and then 72.7 this year.
I really put myself in a position where I have to root for Badgley to miss.
Wait, so if Badgley, obviously he has to make the roster and he makes more than 82.5.
Yeah.
Alex buys Tyler a PF Chang's gift card.
Yeah. And if he doesn't make 82.5, then Tyler owes me a gift card. If he doesn't make the roster, then the bet is void.
Makes sense. Okay, I'll shake on it.
Through the Zoom.
Great. You didn't count the fact that he could be cut, go to another team, and make one field goal in one game, and he's at 100%, and then he's done.
I said if he doesn't make the team, it's void.
Yeah, he said if he doesn't make the team, it's
Okay, if he
void.
makes the team, then he's cut, then he goes to another team.
That's also void. It's
I didn't hear that part.
Well, that's interesting. I'm going to be looking forward to seeing how that plays out. And obviously, listen, whoever wins the kicking battle,
Yeah.
I hope that they're successful. Whether that's Badgley, I don't really care. I hope he ditches the nickname if he does make the
Yeah,
roster.
seriously.
Because that just did not work out for him as soon as he trademarked that thing and it all went downhill.
Mhm.
All right, Tyler and Alex, before we wrap up today, any other thoughts on kicking or any other news or anything like that?
I just want to make it clear, I'm not being the pessimist. Like, if Badgley makes the team, I'll root for him to make every single field goal. Let's get the first, career 100% kicker in franchise history. Like, that would be awesome. I don't know if it's realistic to expect at this point, but I'd like to be proven wrong.
Yeah, I'm really glad I gave myself more of a reason to be anxious during kicks now, and I can't wait to die of a heart attack by week 7.
It's gonna be so much fun, man. Like, because watching kickers is so lame, but having a bet on it, I think will make a lot of sense. I'm gonna take Tyler's side on this one. I think he will make more than 82 kicks. But Alex, you don't have to pay me if it doesn't. Don't worry. But I will pay you if he does not make more than 82 points.
I'm hoping Kessman makes the team. Just avoid the bet entirely.
Just avoid the bet so no one loses any money. But yeah, this has been fun. I've enjoyed talking kickers for once. So shout out to you guys for making that happen. I hope everyone listening has a wonderful weekend for whatever you were doing, whatever you have planned. Except if you work at PFF, I hope you die because you
Jesus,
voted
Steven.
Justin Herbert.
God. Okay.
Not literally die, okay? I just hope you have a bad weekend
Okay.
because you're stupid.
Someone's trying to make us lose the Blue Wire licenseship.
Just kidding, guys. I hope everyone has a good time. But as always, make sure and leave us a rating or review, comment on our YouTube channel. Make sure you go check out Arjun's latest video on Brandon Staley's and defensive patterns and sub packages. And Scott Simpson has also released a video recently about Justin Herbert. Alex, I think you wrote an article today, right? That you published?
Yeah, I wrote an article about Brandon Staley's coaching odds, which you kind of talked about last episode. So go check that out.
Awesome. Sounds good. Tyler, you got anything special you want to share?
Yeah, my Neiman special teams sort of
Yes.
player thing dropped yesterday, so thanks for remembering.
Special teams player thing. I know you published something, but I couldn't remember what
You're
it was. So yeah, go check that out. And as always, bolt up.
Hope Matt Gay has a great day.
Me
That
too.
rhymes.
Wow, poet.